Good morning， 各位早安。大家昨天睡得好吗？睡不好，我想很多人这样子哦还是一样，今天非常欢迎各位来参加开源人的年会。那以下有几件事情要做宣导。第一个呢，就是我想各位如果没有拿到便当券的话，请到2楼柜台去拿。第二件事情，如果你是素食者的话，请到4楼去拿那个用餐券。那一样的，用餐完之后，请记得做回收。那如果各位要做这个照片的 tagging 的时候呢，麻烦请用这2个 tag。这些都是老调重提了。那 IRC 的话呢，就是在这个位置。那在 conference room 里面呢，有几件事情不能做的。第一个，请把手机关掉；第二个，请不要饮食；第三个，请不要对，当然是不能抽烟的。不过呢，有一个饮食的部分其实有一些朋友们带水进来，那请用这样的一个标准来检视，就是如果这个瓶水掉到地上会不会倒出来？如果会，请不要带进来，谢谢。那再来呢，还是一样就是虽然我们昨天有宣导了，还是有一些bandwidth monster 会做一些奇怪的事情，像说玩 SC2 啦或者是玩等等之类的，下载这样的东西那请各位大家帮忙一下，我们的 WiFi 频宽很有限，那为了要让大家都可以上网查到资料，请尽量不要做一些奇怪的事情。当然呢 ，hacking 是无罪的。但是请不要 hacking router， 谢谢。试着拿那个 router 的入 password 是怎样？这样是不好的。那再来呢？因为无线讯号，尤其是这一间无线讯号非常的满载，所以如果可以的话，请如果你是在网路线上面，请尽量把你的无线给关掉，把 radio 关掉。那再来呢？自驾无线基地台，虽然我不晓得那什么用，不过。自驾基地台的朋友，请尽可能的把讯号关小，或者是把它关掉。那再来就是宣导时间，就是在旁边有 Nokia N900 的特卖会，请大家多去捧场看一看。楼上4楼有月之的小书展，那书是75折哦。那一样的，就是议程呢还是会有一些小小的变动，所以呢，请各位密切关注议程组的网址。晚上呢，我们在在结束了之后呢，会有一个 shuttle bus， 就会有接驳车把各位送到南港站。所以为了节能减碳，请尽量利用。好，以上报告，那请各位好好的享受今天的会议吧，谢谢。
早上好，
欢迎大家来到 GNOME.Asia 今天第2天的议程。
Okay, welcome to COSCUP GNOME.Asia Summit 2010 second day.
我们先在这边做一个简单的调查。
So we're going to do a simple introduction.
这边有用过 GNOME 1点插板的，请举手一下好吗
I didn't understand what he said.
OK， 那这些人年龄可能跟我一样有点年纪不好意思。OK， 有用过 GNOME 2点插板的，请举手一下好吗
So who is using GNOME 2?
OK， 谢谢。有用过 GNOME 3点插板的，跟我一样很勇敢的，请举手一下吗
Who is using GNOME 3 like he is?
哇
！1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
OK， 那这边有谁知道优秀的桌面环境、有趣的桌面环境，跟有正妹同事一样有生产力效果的，请举手。看来只有我一个人知道这件事情。OK， 没关系。等一下我们会有来自美国 Oracle 的 Brian 来帮大家介绍一下 GNOME 3这个东西。它大概就是 GNOME Shell， 尤其是 GNOME Shell 的未来的发展。
So we're going to welcome Brian. Brian has been involved in GNOME project for the last 10 years. He's been involved in as a maintainer of GDM for the last 105 years, I was told. Oh, sorry, 20 years.
OK， 那我们现在欢迎 GDM 的维护者，让我们就用最热烈的掌声来欢迎 Brian。
So, welcome, Brian.
GNOME-san, Zaidagni. Ni hao, I don't speak Chinese. I'm sure I just said that my mother eats flaming firecrackers or something. Please, yes, thank you. My name is Brian Cameron, and I serve on the board of directors of the GNOME Foundation. I act as a secretary, and I've been involved with GNOME for 10 years. It's been an exciting ride, and this presentation is about GNOME 3. Give me a minute just to set up. I'll be right with you. GNOME 3 is the culmination of 13 years of hard work by the GNOME software community. We've been working hard to provide a free desktop that can be used by everyone, regardless of their level of ability, their level of income. Free software is technology that allows people around the world to use technology. And the GNOME community is very proud to be the world's first free desktop. In the GNOME desktop, the user experience is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. GNOME has always had a focus of making things simple, making things easy for users. Made of simple is our current marketing slogan. So as we're approaching the release of GNOME 3.0 this March, a lot of thought has gone into revamping the usability experience of the GNOME desktop. But I think in order to understand the future, it's important to spend some time looking at our past. This is what Unix desktops looked like in the late 90s. This is the common desktop environment, and it was a collaborative project between companies like Sun and Novell and IBM and other companies. And but when I look at this desktop, it makes me think that it could have given Windows 3.0 a good run for the money. But a fellow, Miguel de Acasa, a person who is from Mexico, he started the GNOME. He started the GNOME project in 1997, in March. When he wrote this letter, you can see he sent it to the GTK list at Red Hat at the time. And he announced that the GNOME desktop project, the GNU Network Object Model Environment, was born. And you can see here some of the goals that Miguel had for the GNOME desktop, what he thought back in 1997 was important. And you can see at the very beginning of the GNOME, the simplicity. We want applications to have a common look and feel, to share as many visual elements and UI components as possible, made of simple. We want to use a GTK toolkit. We want to encourage people to contribute code, and we plan to export the GTK API through a procedural database. I think the one thing he got wrong, though, is he planned to write GNOME in Scheme. How many Scheme programmers are out there? I see one hand. It's probably good that we didn't end up implementing it in Scheme then. No one would be able to help. Now, why was GNOME created? In response to the common desktop environment, the problem with the common desktop environment is that it wasn't a desktop that could be used on free operating systems, because the common desktop environment is proprietary, it's closed source. So around this time, in the late 90s, the KDE community came up with a desktop, and their desktop was licensed under the GPL, so this looked all very good. But on closer inspection, the entire KDE desktop depends on the Qt library, which at that time had a proprietary license that you had to pay a fee in order to use. So it wasn't possible to use a desktop on a free operating system without paying money. So the GNOME project was born in order to be the world's first free desktop. You can see that the intention was to release GNOME with libraries under the LGPL license, offering the most flexibility in terms of providing a desktop that supports both free and proprietary applications. And do you think we succeeded with GNOME-O? That looks real simple to use, doesn't it? Symbian came along and they improved the desktop quite a bit. I think a lot of their work showed the GNOME community a lot of focus in terms of how to improve usability. And the GNOME Foundation, which is an organization that supports the GNOME community, was formed in August 2000 at the Linux World Expo in San Jose. As I said before, I'm a board member of the GNOME Foundation, and the GNOME Foundation is a charity organization that helps to support the GNOME community. GNOME 2.x was released in June 2002, almost 8 years ago. So, as I said before, GNOME 3.0 is a culmination of 8 long years of development effort. When you compare GNOME 2 with what GNOME looks like today, I think the differences are quite outstanding. GNOME 2.0 in its first release did not support accessibility. It wasn't until about GNOME 2.16 that GNOME was usably accessible by people with disabilities. And GNOME 2.0 also didn't have very good removable media support. So if you plugged in a flash disk, nothing would happen. But now in GNOME, the desktop is very responsive to plugging in all sorts of devices, cameras and USB devices. So it works as you'd expect. And now that Fluendo is selling multimedia codecs for use in Linux and Open Solaris, people can now play popular media formats. Here's another picture of GNOME 2. And this is what GNOME looks like today. That's a shot I took yesterday of GNOME 2.30 running on my desktop. And I think it looks pretty nice. I think a lot of various Linux distributions are shipping a long-term support release this year or in the next year. And to my understanding, all of them are going to be shipping GNOME 2.30 or 2.28 or a